We got off at the Cheese and settled ourselves comfortably in a corner. The same seats are there running along the wall where Dr. Johnson, Goldie, and Boswell so often sat and waked the echoes with their laughter. We had chops and tomato sauce in recollection of Jingle and Trotter. The chops were of that delicious kind unknown outside of England. I supplied the legend this time, for my messmate had never heard of Boswell. Hawkins introduced me to the cove in the white apron, who waited upon us, and then explained that I was the man who wrote Martin Chuzzlewit. He kissed his hand to the elderly woman who presided behind the nickel-plated American cash register. The only thing that rang false about the place was that register, perked up there spick-span new. Hawkins insisted that it was a typewriter, and as we passed out he took a handful of matches, thinking them toothpicks, and asked the cashier to play a tune on the thingamabob, but she declined. We made our way to London Bridge as the night was settling down. No stars came out, but flickering, fluttering gaslights appeared, and around each post was a great, gray, fluffy aureole of mist. Just at the entrance to the bridge we saw Nancy dogged by Noah Claypole. They turned down towards Billingsgate Fish Market, and as the fog swallowed them, Hawkins answered my question as to the language used at Billingsgate. "It's not so bloomin' bad, you know. Why, I'll take you to a market in Islington where they talk twice as vile." He started to go into technicalities, but I excused him. Then he leaned over the parapet and spat down at a rowboat that was passing below. As the boat moved out into the glimmering light, we made out Lizzie Hexam at the oars, while Gaffer sat in the stern on the lookout. The Marchioness went by as we stood there, a bit of a tattered shawl over her frowsy head, one stocking down around her shoe-top. She had a penny loaf under her arm, and was breaking off bits, eating as she went. Soon came Snagsby, then Mr. Vincent Crummles, Mr. Sleary, the horseback rider, followed by Chops, the dwarf, and Pickleson, the giant. Hawkins said there were 2 Picklesons, but I saw only one. Just below was the stone pier, and there stood Mrs. Gamp, and I heard her ask, "And which of them smoking monsters is the Anxworth boat, I wonder? Goodness me!" "Which boat do you want?" asked Ruth. "The Anxworks package. I will not deceive you, sweet. Why should I?" "Why, that is the Antwerp packet, in the middle," said Ruth. "And I wish it was in Jonnage's belly, I do," cried Mrs. Gamp. We came down from the bridge, moved over toward Billingsgate, past the custom house, where curious old sea captains wait for ships that never come. Captain Cuttle lifted his hook to the brim of his glazed hat as we passed. We returned the salute and moved on toward the tower. "It's a rum place, let's not stop," said Hawkins. Thoughts of the ghosts of Raleigh, of Mary Queen of Scots, and of Lady Jane Grey seemed to steady his gait and to hasten his footsteps. In a few moments we saw just ahead of us David Copperfield and Mr. Peggotty following a woman whom we could make out walking excitedly a block ahead. It was Martha, intent on suicide. "We'll get to the dock first and 'ead her off," said 'Awkins. We ran down a side street, but a bright light in a little brick cottage caught our attention. Men can't run arm in arm anyway. We forgot our errand of mercy and stood still with open mouths looking in at the window at little Jenny Wren, hard at work dressing her dolls and stopping now and then to stab the air with her needle. Bradley Headstone and Charlie and Lizzie Hexam came in, and we then passed on, not wishing to attract attention. There was an old smoke-stained tree on the corner which I felt sorry for, as I do for every city tree. Just beyond was a blacksmith's forge and a timber yard behind, where a dealer in old iron had a shop, in front of which was a rusty boiler and a gigantic flywheel half buried in the sand. There were no crowds to be seen now, but we walked on, generally in the middle of the narrow streets, turning up or down or across, through arches where tramps slept, by doorways where children crouched, passing drunken men and women with shawls over their heads. Now and again the screech of a fiddle could be heard, or the lazy music of an accordion, coming from some sailor's home. Steps of dancing with rattle of iron-shod boot heels clicking over sanded floors, the hoarse shout of the collar off, and now and again angry tones with cracked feminine falsettos broke on the air. And all the time the soft rain fell, and steam seemed to rise from the sewage-laden streets. We were in Stepney, that curious parish so minutely described by Walter Besant in All Sorts and Conditions of Men, the parish where all children born at sea were considered to belong. We saw Brig Place, where Walter Gay visited Captain Cuttle. Then we went with Pip in search of Mrs. Wimple's house at Mill Pond Bank, Chinks Basin, Old Green Copper Rope Walk, where lived old Billy Barley and his daughter Clara, and where Magwitch was hidden. It was the dingiest collection of shabby buildings ever squeezed together in a dark corner as a club for tomcats. Then, standing out in the gloom, we saw Limehouse Church, where John Rokesmith prowled about on a 'tective scent, and where John Harmon waited for the third mate Radfoot, intending to murder him. Next we reached Limehouse Hole, where Rogue Rider Hood took the plunge down the steps of Leaving Shop. Hawkins thought he saw the Artful Dodger ahead of us on the dock. He went over and looked up and down and under an old upturned rowboat, then peered over the dock and swore a harmless oath that if he could catch him we could run him in without a warrant. Yes, we'd clap the nippers on him and march him orf. Not if I can help it, I said. I like the fellow too well. Fortunately, Hawkins failed to find him. Here it was that the uncommercial traveler did patrol duty on many sleepless nights. Here it was that Esther Summerson and Mr. Bucket came. And by the light of a match held under my hat we read a handbill on the brick wall. Found, drowned. The heading stood out in big fat letters, but the print below was too damp to read. Yet there is no doubt it is the same bill that Gaffer Hexam, Eugene Rayburn, and Mortimer Lightwood read, for Mr. Hawkins said so. As we stood there we heard the gentle gurgle of the tide running under the pier, then a dip of oars coming from out the murky darkness of the muddy river. A challenge from the shore with orders to row in, a hoarse, defiant answer, and a watchman's rattle. A policeman passed us running and called back, "I say, Hawkins, is that you? There's murder broke loose in Whitechapel again. The reserves have been ordered out." Hawkins stopped and seemed to pull himself together. His height increased 3 inches. A moment before I thought he was a candidate for fatty degeneration of the cerebrum, but now his sturdy frame was all a-tremble with life. "Another murder! I knew it! Bill Sykes has killed Nancy at last. There's 50 pun for the man who puts the irons on him. I must make for the nearest station." He gave my hand a twist, shot down a narrow courtway, and I was left to fight the fog, and mayhap this Bill Sykes and all the other wild phantoms of Dickens' brain, alone. A certain great general once said that the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Just why the maxim should be limited to aborigines I know not, for when one reads obituaries he is discouraged at the thoughts of competing in virtue with those who have gone hence. Let us extend the remark, plagiarize a bit, and say that the only perfect men are those whom we find in books. The receipt for making them is simple, yet well worth pasting in your scrapbook. Take the virtues of all the best men you ever knew or heard of, leave out the faults, then mix. In the hands of the lady novelist, this composition, well molded, makes a scarecrow, in the hair of which the birds of the air come and build their nests. But manipulated by an expert, a figure may appear that starts and moves and seems to feel the thrill of life. It may even take its place on a pedestal and be exhibited with other waxworks and thus become confounded with the historic. And though these things make the unskilful laugh, yet the judicious say, "Dickens made it, therefore let it pass for a man." Dear old M. Taine, ever glad to score a point against the British, and willing to take Dickens at his word, says, "We have no such men in France as Scrooge and Squeers." But God bless you, M. Taine, England has no such men either. The novelist takes the men and women he has known, and from life, plus imagination, he creates. If he sticks too close to nature, he describes, not depicts. This is veritism. If imagination's wing is too strong, it lifts the luckless writer off from earth and carries him to an unknown land. You may then fall down and worship his characters, and there is no violation of the first commandment. Nothing can be imagined that has not been seen, but imagination can assort, omit, sift, select, construct. Given a horse, an eagle, an elephant, and the creative artist can make an animal that is neither a horse, an eagle, nor an elephant, yet resembles each. This animal may have 8 legs, or 40, with hoofs, claws, and toes alternating, a beak, a trunk, a mane, and the whole can be feathered and given the power of rapid flight, and also the ability to run like the east wind. It can neigh, roar, or scream by turn, or can do it all in concert, with a vibratory force multiplied by 1,000. The novelist must have lived, and the novelist must have imagination. But this is not enough. He must have power to analyze and separate, and then he should have the good taste to select and group, forming his parts into a harmonious whole. Yet he must build large. Life-size will not do. The statue must be heroic, and the artist's genius must breathe into its nostrils the breath of life. The men who live in history are those whose lives have been skillfully written. "Plutarch is the most charming writer of fiction the world has ever known," said Emerson. Dickens' characters are personifications of traits, not men and women. Yet they are a deal funnier. They are as funny as a box of monkeys, as entertaining as a Punch and Judy show, as interesting as a 15 puzzle, and sometimes as pretty as Chromos. Quilp munching the eggs, shell and all, to scare his wife, makes one shiver as though a jack-in-the-box had been popped out at him. Mr. Mould, the undertaker, and Jaggers, the lawyer, are as amusing as Humpty Dumpty and Pantaloon. I am sure that no live lawyer ever gave me half the enjoyment that Jaggers has, and Dr. Slammer's talk is better medicine than the pills of any living M.D. Because the burnt cork minstrel pleases me more than the real nigger is no reason why I should find fault. Dickens takes the horse, the eagle, and the elephant, and makes an animal of his own. He rubs up the feathers, places the tail at a fierce angle, makes the glass eyes glare, and you are ready to swear that the thing is alive. By rummaging over the commercial world, you can collect the harshness, greed, avarice, selfishness, and vanity from 1,000 men. With these sins you can, if you are very skillful, construct a Ralph Nickleby, a Scrooge, a Jonas Chuzzlewit, an Alderman Cute, a Mr. Murdstone, a Bounderby, or a Gradgrind at will. A little more pride, a little less hypocrisy, a molecule extra of untruth, and flavor this fault or that, and your man is ready to place up against the fence to dry. Then you can make a collection of all the ridiculous traits, the whims, silly pride, foibles, hopes founded on nothing, and dreams touched with moonshine, and you can make a Micawber. Put in a dash of assurance and a good thimbleful of hypocrisy, and Pecksniff's is the product. Leave out the assurance, replacing it with cowardice, and the result is Dr. Chillip or Uriah Heep. Muddle the whole with stupidity, and Bumble comes forth. Then, for the good people, collect the virtues and season to suit the taste, and we have the Cheeryble brothers, Paul Dombey or Little Nell. They have no development, therefore no history. The circumstances under which you meet them vary, that's all. They are people the like of whom are never seen on land or sea. Little Nell is good all day long, while live children are good for only 5 minutes at a time. The recurrence with which these 5-minute periods return determines whether the child is good or bad. In the intervals, the restless little feet stray into flower beds, stand on chairs so that grimy dimpled hands may reach forbidden jam, run and romp in pure joyous innocence, or kick spitefully at authority. Then the little fellow may go to sleep, smile in his dreams so that Mama says angels are talking to him. Nurse says wind on the stomach. When he awakens, the 5-minute good spell returns. Men are only grown-up children. They are cheerful after breakfast, cross at night. Houses, lands, barns, railroads, churches, books, racetracks are the playthings with which they amuse themselves until they grow tired, and death, the kind old nurse, puts them to sleep. So a man on earth is good or bad as mood moves him. In color his acts are seldom pure white, neither are they wholly black, but generally of a steel gray. Caprice, temper, accident, all act upon him. The north wind of hate, the simoon of jealousy, the cyclone of passion beat and buffet him. Pilots strong and pilots cowardly stand at the helm by turn. But sometimes the south wind softly blows, the sun comes out by day, the stars at night. Friendship holds the rudder firm, and love makes all secure. Such is the life of man, a voyage on life's unresting sea. But Dickens knows it not. Esther is always good, Fagin is always bad, Bumble is always pompous, and Scrooge is always Scrooge. At no Dickens party do you ever mistake Cheeryble for Carker, yet in real life Carker is Carker one day and Cheeryble the next. Yes, Carker in the morning and Cheeryble after dinner. There is no doubt that a dummy so ridiculous as Pecksniff has reduced the number of hypocrites, and the domineering and unjust are not quite so popular since Dickens painted their picture with a broom. From the yeasty deep of his imagination he conjured forth his strutting spirits, and the names he gave to each are as fitting and as funny as the absurd small clothes and fluttering ribbons which they wear. Shakespeare has his Gobbo, Touchstone, Simcox, Sly, Grumio, Mopsa, Pinch, Nym, Simple, Quickly, Overdone, Elbow Froth, Dogberry, Puck, Pea-blossom, Taurus, Bottom, Bushy, Hotspur, Scroop, Wall, Flute, Snout, Starveling, Moonshine, Mouldy, Shallow, Wart, Bullcalf, Feeble, Quince, Snag, Dull, Mustard Seed, Fang, Snare, Rumour, Tearsheet, Cobweb, Costard, and Moth. But in names as well as in plot, the father of Pickwick has distanced the master. In fact, to give all the odd and whimsical names invented by Dickens would be to publish a book, for he compiled an indexed volume of names from which he drew at will. He used, however, but a fraction of his list. The rest are wisely kept from the public, else, forsooth, the fledgling writers of penny shockers would seize upon them for raw stock. Dickens has a watch that starts and stops in a way of its own, never mind the sun. He lets you see the wheels go round, but he never tells you why the wheels go round. He knows little of psychology, that curious unseen thing that stands behind every act. He knows not the highest love, therefore he never depicts the highest joy. Nowhere does he show the gradual awakening in man of godlike passion. Nowhere does he show the evolution of a soul. Very, very seldom does he touch the sublime. But he has given the Athenians a day of pleasure, and for this let us all reverently give thanks.